These two stones underneath my feet are very important because this gives us what is called a sealed locus. They are undisturbed from antiquity. We're going to go ahead and remove this big stone right here. All right, well, for the first time in 2,000 years, we could get a look at what's under here.
We've mounted a campaign to use the most high-tech geophysical research so that we're not having students spinning their wheels when they're out in the field. So we have two techniques. We use ground-penetrating radar, which is radar that looks down about 5 feet and can identify strata, archaeological strata below the surface. And if there's something there, we'll take students to excavate it. But we have a second technique that looks through 20 and 30 meters. I mean, really huge down. So from the very top of the mountain all the way down to the ancient foundation. And this technique, electrical resistivity tomography, it's an MRI for the ground. And what it does is it can identify artifacts that are below the surface. And just like gas and oil exploration that uses this technique, the good news is it can identify and color code if something is glass or metal or fired pottery or stone or any different type of resistance to the electrical charge that we put into the ground. And then the software comes back, gives us a readout, and we can say, we're going to excavate here, 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 and here. And that's what makes archaeology modern, but it also saves us huge amounts of time.
There are really four main phases in excavation, and usually people only think of one, and that's what we're doing right now in the field, the actual excavation. We begin with the whole process of acquiring the permissions, raising the money, training the teams, and this may take several years before we ever even put a spade into the ground.
I started the project here at Huqoq because I have done a lot of research in the last couple of decades on ancient synagogues, and particularly on a kind of synagogue building called Galilean-type synagogues. The best example of a Galilean-type synagogue is the very famous synagogue at Capernaum, which is located only a couple of miles away from here. Now, the actual name Huqoq is an ancient name. It comes from the Hebrew Bible. Huqoq is mentioned in connection with the settlement of the tribes of Asher and Naphtali. So we know that there was settlement here for many different periods throughout history.
Then we begin the excavation process. And here at Khirbet el-Maqater, we dig 3 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks in the winter. The reason we came to Khirbet el-Maqater in the first place was to address the problem of eye. There is a tell just behind me called Et Tel, which is associated with the Eye of Abraham's Day. When it was excavated in the 1960s, the evidence there seemed to not support the biblical account. We thought that merited some further investigation. Investigating alternative sites in the area led us to Khirbet el-Maqater. We started excavations here in 1995. According to the Antiquities Authority, we're now the largest dig in Israel.
By 5 a.m. it gets light enough to see, so they're already digging by 5. And we then dig until breakfast time. We have a wonderful field breakfast, and then we continue digging until about noon. And some people think that we dig until noon because of the heat, but actually it's not the reason. We stop at around noon because it starts to get windy here at around 11 a.m. The winds pick up, and by about noon, the winds become so strong that they blow down our shade cloths, and we can't keep them up anymore. It gets dangerous. You see the way that we dig in a grid of squares.
Now, an archaeological square is 6 by 6 meters. Sometimes we maintain balks on the north and the east, sometimes we don't, just depending on the type of material that we're excavating.
People think that balks, those sides of the squares, the 1 meter banks of earth between the squares, are there for convenience for people to walk on so we can walk around. That's not what it's for. They're the points of reference for us, and everything that we do is measured in relation to those points of reference.
In that square, there may be anywhere from 4 to 8 people working with that square supervisor.
So let's say that we take a coin out of the ground now. It's very important for us to have all the points of reference of where that coin was located in space, both vertically and horizontally, because afterwards those points of reference are going to be gone.
And so as you're finding things and documenting where you find them, the most important thing to know is where the level was.
Tel Burna is located just in between Tel Asafi Ghat, which is identified with Philistine Ghat, and Lachish, which was the main Judean city during the Iron Age in this region.
Well, we have a professional surveyor that comes in at the beginning of the season and sets up a benchmark, which is going to be our absolute elevation. Every day we're going to set up the instrument that's going to read the levels. So you're going to measure using a measuring pole, and then you're going to subtract down to the place where the artifact was found.
We are in Nazareth, the home village of Jesus. Now behind me is a house that perhaps was the home of Jesus. From an archaeological point of view, it is significant because it provides us with further information about how the people of Nazareth lived. Excavations at other sites, some only a block or so away, have given us indications that the people of Nazareth were not poor.
So I'm going to present to you this house, and it's a house from the 1st century. It was discovered in 2009 and it was a big surprise. And it's the foundation of a house in the neighborhood of the house where Jesus was living. We thought that Nazareth was a poor village at the time of Jesus. A few houses lost in the nowhere, and Nazareth was unknown to anyone. When they found this house, it was a surprise because it was strong, well built, quite rich, and it was a 2 floors house. So it means that it's a quite rich house. 3 objects were found here, 2 vessels, and those vessels are made of stone. So this means that probably people living here are Jewish because they were eating according to kashrut laws. The second thing we found was a lamp, an oil lamp, which was coming from the temple in Jerusalem. And we think that this family was Jewish and going to Jerusalem for the annual or biannual pilgrimage to the temple. The family was going there and they would bring back a lamp because they were bringing back the light of the house, the temple of Jerusalem giving the light for the house and a kind of blessing.
Now, we just came out of Hezekiah's tunnel, which was produced in the 8th century BC in order to supply during a siege anticipated by Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Siege of Jerusalem, they wanted to have a reliable water supply. It was just a brilliant piece of engineering. Over 500 meters in length. They began at the opposite sides, came to the middle, connected. It was remarkable. But we didn't know where the pool of Siloam was in the time of Jesus. And where we are standing right now was discovered only a few years ago. And you can see the steps. Now, these are original steps. A couple of these steps here are modern just to make it safer. But what we have here is the original pool of Siloam, and it would come down with these steps. I'm right at the bottom of the pool, and then if you go further over here, which we can't because you can see the earth and there's an orchard, it's private property. Someday it might be excavated, but this is the rest of the pool over here. So uncovered is about 1/3 of it.
The pool of Siloam, it has been found at the October 2004 we started to dig. Before that, there was a street on the top of this place until that corner what you see on the top. And they found part of the steps when they was preparing the sewage pipe. You see the black pipe over there? When they started digging, they moved a stone from 2,000 years, and we started to dig until we found all of these steps, until we found that corner over here. We found another corner down over here, and then we believe that we found the real pool of Siloam.
In this square, we're excavating a sort of a sondage, which is this little like kind of test sounding to see what we have next to the cistern. We have a cistern here that was originally an ancient cistern and continued in use right up into modern times. And we're interested in sort of the activity around the cistern and how it relates to the synagogue.
So the main way we excavate in this square is with a small hammer or pastiche. Usually we try to bring it across levelly. And it's sort of a swinging action, letting the weight of the tool carry backwards and you get a pretty level plane doing this. And you don't want your dirt to collect over too much, so we spend a lot of time sweeping and dumping. If we come across anything that looks like a color change, we then switch to our trowels. Digging at about a 45% angle, we cut into the dirt to see if we can see it a little bit better.
One of the things that we want to do when we dig is make sure that all the time we're digging at the same level horizontally across whatever area we're digging, and not digging deeper in any one area unless we know for sure that there's something later that's dug into it. And the reason is, if we start to dig down deeper or make little pits and holes in what we're digging through, we're liable to mix earlier and later material up together, and that contaminates what we're digging. So we want to try and make sure that we are digging through the same period of remains. To keep everything clean, we always try to dig at the same level across.
A balk is a 1 meter bank of earth standing between our squares. In this case, we actually came upon a cobble surface. Most of the cobbles are now gone. We removed most of them for safety. Some of them are too far in to pull out. And then directly beneath it, we came upon this ash pit. And what you see here are the different layers of the ash pit. We counted 5 different layers. So we have a gray ash and a black ash, and a little bit of brown gray material here, and then this yellow sand that actually surrounded the entire upper layer of ash. And then we have another layer of black ash.
We're on the north side of the synagogue building here, but we're way above the level of the synagogue. And what we've been doing is digging from the contemporary ground level, the modern ground level, going down towards the original synagogue building. We're going to be passing a medieval floor level along the way, but we haven't gotten that far yet. And this square is being supervised by Jocelyn Burney.
We started, as Jody said, at ground level here, about 1.5 meters up. Now we're heading through a fill, which is pretty easy to dig through, hoping to get to this medieval building by the end of the day. So this is the ground level that we started at, where the balk is. And you can see these stones, like this big one here. This is all components of that modern wall that we first excavated. But it ends here after the foundation, and pretty much after that you see there's not much going on here. So this is all fill that we've been powering through over the last couple days in hopes of getting to the medieval building.
There are certain types of artifacts or objects, finds, that we dig up in association with architecture, with building remains or whatever, that will help us date what we're digging up. How do we date what we dig up? And I say, before you answer that question, whatever it is that you tell me that you can use to date has to fit one of 2 categories. It either has to carry its own date, or it has to be an extremely common find on archaeological excavations. Coins, of course, carry their own date. They have a date on them. They're minted. Now, every one of these categories of objects, by the way, has advantages and disadvantages, and I'm not going to go into it for you, but just to say as an example, for example, so coins have the advantage of having a date on them, but they have a lot of disadvantages too. So one disadvantage of coins is that a lot of times we get coins that are so worn that the date can't be read any longer, so they're not useful. Another problem with coins that people tend to forget, and especially archaeologists, is that coins remained in circulation for long periods after they were minted in antiquity.
Until about 5 years ago, the Antiquities Authority did not allow metal detectors on archaeological sites, and this put us at a disadvantage because the looters, vandals that would come to archaeological sites, and this is not our site, this is just across the Middle East is a problem, they would, of course, bring metal detectors, and we were at a great disadvantage. Fortunately, about 5 years ago, there was a policy change at the Antiquities Authority where we are now able to use metal detection. So we have a metal detectorist on site every day that is going over the squares, going over our sift piles and our dump piles. And about every 15 minutes on our site, we find a coin. So we are about to pass the 1,000 mark in coins that we have excavated. The metal detectorist not only finds coins, but other objects as well. We have things that are older, bronze medallions, tools, pliers, tweezers, makeup applicators. And it's very interesting because although this was a typical Second Temple period city where they were practicing ritual purity, apparently the women use makeup because we have their makeup applicators and their jewelry and so forth. And she's got a hit right now. Okay, I see it. This is what we would call a strap coin. See where it's been cut? It's squarish right there, and it's cut there and cut there. It's not perfectly round, so there was a whole strap of these, and then they cut them, so we call it a strap coin. Probably has one in, 1st century BC. There you go. One of 1,000 coins approximately. Excellent. From Khirbet el-Maqader that help us piece together the story of the site. Well, when pottery first comes out of the ground, we do an immediate identification on it. In an average square, there may be anywhere from 3 to 30 different loci. That means there's a different pottery pail for each locus within the square.
Then you can turn, a section that you're digging, a locus, into a particular time period, and you can tell them where they are chronologically when they're digging. So we read as we go. We don't store it up and read it. We read it every day. So when the square supervisors go back in, they know chronologically what kind of terrain they're working, And this is a gorgeous site for that kind of thing, by the way. It's pottery rich. It's pottery heaven.
3 years ago, we had 2 scarabs that we excavated in a sealed locus just above bedrock that were very important because one pertained, it was a Hyksos period scarab, Middle Bronze 3, that helped us date the foundation of the fortress. Then we had a scarab that we can concretely date to the 18th Egyptian dynasty, Amenhotep or Thutmose III. And that was very important because that was the destruction level of the fortress. These 2 stones underneath my feet are very important because this gives us what is called a sealed locus. Very few of our loci are sealed. In other words, we cannot prove that they are undisturbed from antiquity. We're going to go ahead and remove this big stone right here. Guys, if you can come give me a hand, we're going to flip this over and then try to, if we can, get it up on top of this stone and then slide it into your square, and then that'll expose this soil to us. For the first time in 2,000 years, we can get a look at what's under here. I see immediately pottery. Let's pull out that diagnostic sherd, Brian, right down in the little hole there. That looks older period than what was above it. So we'll begin to excavate in just a few minutes. This is sort of the meat and potatoes. Here's a bone. All right, so if you can get me a red mesh bag, Dr. Peterson will separate our bone out. First look at it, it could be human. We'll have to have it analyzed. So anyway, we're going to peel back just about a centimeter at a time while we're troweling, and this is basic stratigraphy. Just looking at how the handle's going to go. It is not revolt ware, 1st century. It looks like it's better made than that. So my first look at it is it's Hellenistic, but what we really want is the handle that's attached to the rim. That's how we can nail it. Dr. Peterson, could we get a look at that scarab? Okay, so here is the scarab that just about an hour ago while we were talking was excavated under Dr. Brian Peterson, Old Testament professor at Lee University supervision. All 3 of our scarabs, in fact, came out of the same area. And you can see that it's soft limestone, so we're gonna have to be really careful with it. We'll take it to our conservator to, get it conserved properly. She can do an impression from it. It's a dung beetle. There are always dung beetles on the back. The Egyptians believed that the dung beetle pushed the sun across the sky every day. And then as we look on the back, Dr. Peterson, tell us what you're seeing here.
What we have here appears to be the cartouche of either Thutmose III or Amenhotep II, which is working with our theory here that this is in fact of the late 15th century.
So that's pretty amazing.